AviaDev brings you SkyHeroes. These heroes are slightly different. They don't possess any superpowers. They are not going to save the world. But if you're interested in aviation and you need a little break from all the negative news, they might save your day. Because they breathe the aviation industry inside out. They have decades of experience in the business. They have an opinion, and they are not afraid to use it. SkyHeroes. And now your host. Very few people across the globe are able to pronounce his name correctly, but he doesn't really care. Jorgen taught.
Welcome again, everyone, to a new format by AviaDev, Aviation Talk Show, where three of our industry experts will be sharing their opinions on hot aviation topics in a light way, sometimes controversial, sometimes not completely politically correct, sometimes hopefully funny. But if we can still laugh, even in these difficult times, it means we are still alive, right? For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jorgen. I'm the Managing Director at AviaDev Europe. Without further ado, let me welcome our SkyHeroes today. John Grant, partner at Midas Aviation, the engine behind the AviaDev Consult, chief analyst at OAG, and a dedicated supporter of a nice little Premier League football club. Welcome, John. Hans-Jorgen Elnaes, independent aviation analyst from Norway with experience from wide spectrum of airlines, including Ryanair and Qatar Airways. You can't really get two airlines who are more different from each other than these two. And last but definitely not least, Max Oldorf, Chief Commercial Officer and co-founder at CH Aviation, a true avgeek with a special place in his heart for some of the weirdest aircraft out there, including Yak 40, for example. Welcome, Max.
Hey, Juri. How are you?
I'm very well, thanks a lot. And before we dive into the first topic, quick question to you, John. You've been writing a weekly blog for OAG with all the global data and statistics about the capacity that's in the systems. So tell me, what helps you to create content? And sometimes it seems like it's the same doom and gloom every single week. Sometimes it's getting even worse. So how do you manage to keep sanity while writing about this?
Alcohol. It works very easily. Look. Yeah, the numbers are depressing, but they tell a story. And in every story, you can have a half glass perspective, or you can have the sort of half full perspective that is things are going to get better. There's always that little ray of optimism out there. And, yes, it can be frustrating. I don't think anyone would have thought we'd be back down at 50 million passengers a week, or capacity a week at the moment. We knew the first half of the year was going to be bad, particularly the first quarter, but my God, it's been even more depressing than I think anyone could have hoped for. Frustrating.
Indeed. However, we have some slightly positive news up there in Norway. So for the first topic, we have our TV superstar from Scandinavia, Hans, as he's reporting on several TV channels on a regular basis about what's going on in the industry, and especially with Norwegian. So as I mentioned recently, there have been some slightly encouraging news about Norwegian. So Hans, can you give us a little bit overview on what's happening there?
Yeah, so as all your viewers probably well aware about is that Norwegian has been in a very serious financial situation now since the commence of COVID-19. And the management of the company is working very hard through this turbulence in order to save Norwegian and relaunch this as new Norwegian. And the latest news here is that the Norwegian government last week, they confirmed that they will participate with about 150 million euro in a rights issue that Norwegian will perform later in February. In order to capitalize the company, and totally they go for the market in a rights issue to invest.
Hans, can I ask you a question on that? Actually, that was on my mind for a long time. Why has the Norwegian government out of a sudden changed its mind on that? Because they always said, no, we're not giving money, we're not giving money. Was that because Wizz Air came in and gave them a hard time, and there was a lot of this uproar of saying, okay, so we'll let Norwegian go bust. Our government lets Norwegian go bust, so some guys from Hungary can take over, or what made them change the mind? I don't get that actually.
Wizz Air did not have much impact on this. The Norwegian government, actually, they've been very clear that the government is not planning to take any equity ownership in any airline. It was SAS, it was Norwegian. What they have done in last year, they offered a state guarantee for 300 million euros, so Norwegian could go to the market and borrow 300 million. This time they come with a hybrid loan, a rather good financial instrument for airlines, as the hybrid loan goes into equity, but without taking a ownership position in the company. So
but what equity do they get in return then if they don't take ownership?
No, actually, the chance is that if Norwegian goes bankrupt, we're going to lose everything. But there is one thing that is committed to this 150 million hybrid loan, and that is that Norwegian first have to clear through the examinership process in Dublin and the Chapter 11 process in Norway. So if they don't make it, Norwegian government and Norwegian taxpayers will not end up in Norwegian. And the reason they do this is to make sure that creditors, offshore creditors, leasing companies or other that have anything debts on Norwegian, don't get their hands on this money. These funds should be used for Norwegian to build up their business primarily in Norway.
Which is pretty much a fallback to how they looked like in the early 2000s, right?
Yeah, Norwegian as a company, yes, they started, small scale in Norway, and now they discontinued their long haul operation. The big 787 Dreamliners, they were simply too high risk and too expensive, and too much problems for them. And the future market is we don't know anything how it's going to start. So they go back to Norway. The business plan, which came also last week, is called New Norwegian. And that will be downsizing from today around 150 aircrafts to 50. And additional, they will have 3 spares. Those aircraft will be based mainly in Norway, 40 of them. And then we have a few that will be maybe based in Sweden and Denmark, or operate to operational base in Stockholm and Copenhagen. And the major part of the ASK, as the capacity, will be done domestic in Norway, and also flights from Norway or Scandinavia to and from Europe, depending on when we can actually go back. But the difficult thing that Norwegian is working in now is to reduce the debt. The current debt is around 68 billion Norwegian kroners, which is around 6.5 billion euros. This debt is going to get down to 20 million Norwegian kroner, about 1.9 billion euros. And 10 million, 900 million euros of this is airline as a liability for leasing and so on, and 10 billion, the other 900 million euros, are interest-bearing debt. And if they get that equity of 5 billion, 500 million euros, you have an equity ratio of 25%. That's pretty good to be an airline. But
I mean, they will have to pay that back then with just 50 aircraft, right? That's quite challenging.
Yeah, that's phase 1 in 2021. In 22, if things goes good, they will increase to 75 maybe aircraft. In 2023, it will increase to.
You know how many aircraft they have flying right now?
8.
No, 3.
No, they're flying 8. In Norway, they are flying 8. They're flying 74,000 passengers in January. So, in average, 7-8 aircraft flying, and that's of course is not sustainable. But in Norway, I mean, the government.
Okay, they're flying them with some of the Norwegian with the Swedish AOC, right?
they have an AOC in Norway, they have AOC in Sweden today.
Yeah, because on the Norwegian one, the one in Norway, they only have 3 active, but they have some more in Sweden. I see that here. Okay.
Yeah, Norwegian is a very complicated structure in terms of AOCs and so on. But what's happening in Norway and helping the airlines is that the government actually is purchasing routes. The main trunk routes in Norway, they are being purchased by the government. So Norwegian, SAS, and Widerøe, they get paid flying them. It's not a big business, but at least to keep some of the aircraft flying. And I think that's a very good idea, and should be copy-pasted by other countries where aviation is an important part of the infrastructure of the country.
Don't tell that, John. He's a big fan of government subsidies.
Well, I'm just listening to you. I'm listening to you thinking, why on earth has anyone saved this airline? Surely it would be better just to let it go out of business. I mean, what is the real probability of them paying back all of these debts? What is the probability of them really surviving?
Why are you asking us questions? It's aviation. Why would whoever thought of paying back debts?
Well, it just strikes me. It's fantasy land. Ricardo Montalban should suddenly come and say, the boat's arriving.
You should take a call to Carsten Spohr in Lufthansa and ask him how he's going to solve his debt problem.
I'm not, you can say it for as many airlines as you wish in Europe, and we could come on and discuss that. But it just strikes me, it's just not going to happen. It's just kill it now rather than let it linger. Surely, start another carrier.
I think you're just jealous because you spend all your money on the EU Brexit. You can't fund your airlines now.
UK airlines haven't been given the same, as in Scandinavia. But just to put one thing for sure, in Norway we are depending on working, infrastructure for airlines. And if Norwegian went bust, SAS would overrun the market with all their pretty nice new A320neos, great airplane, by the way. And that will drive up airfares immensely. That's something that Norwegian government don't want to happen.
Hans, in the last 30 years, how many second-level carriers have there been in Scandinavia that have come and gone?
A lot.
Okay. End of discussion. You're right. What's next? That just says it all, doesn't it?
We'll stay in Norway for a little bit, because obviously what's not helping, what didn't help Norwegian was Wizz Air spreading their wings in Norway. But obviously recent news are saying that they are not doing as well as they were expecting. Is that correct, Hans?
That's correct. And Wizz Air, in October, they opened 2 bases, what we call operational bases in Norway, with a flying crew and aircraft, and they stays in Norway for 90 days and they change. One in Oslo, Gardermoen is the main airport, and then one in the middle of Norway called Trondheim, with 2 A320s. And the Trondheim base was officially closed down on Tuesday. Wizz Air informed about that to be closed down immediately, or as soon as possible. And the reason for that is that in domestic traffic in Norway is down between 80 and 90%. And in the middle of Norway, in Trondheim, the market catchment area is actually pretty bad. And I think Josef Varadi and Wizz Air, they were pretty opportunistic to place 2 big A320-21s with up to 240 seats flying out of there. So they're pulling them back, moving them into Oslo Gardermoen, where they will now have 4 A320s, 321s based. And Oslo Gardermoen was down 90% passengers in January versus January last year. So
will there be enough business for 4 A321s in Oslo?
It will be a load factor of lower double digits. I mean, we're talking 20-30% load factor at the max. So, but Wizz Air is going to invest to stay put in Norway, and they have a 5-year plan. But of course, it's not good business for them now. It's not good business for any airline in Norway the first quarter in this year.
Hans, this is a bigger issue though, isn't it? It's not just in Norway. It's about the whole recovery process, and we're not going to go from low double-digit load factors to suddenly 95% load factors. You know, the recovery curve and the rate that we're going to see is going to put a lot of pressure on airlines through the whole of this summer, because, you know, we're not going to see anything happening before April or May, and it's going to be really, really tough for even the best, you know, practitioners. Ryanair, EasyJet, Wizz Air are going to be slushing around with 30 and 40% load factors for quite some time.
So maybe,
Ryanair, just take just 1 second, Max. If you look to Ryanair, they came with their Q3 results here on Monday. Was the worst result ever in the history of Ryanair, and the financial year will be around €1 billion net loss. But Ryanair, as in my calculation, they have a cash burn per month in the range of 300 million euros, and they have a cash reserve per end of January around 3.5 billion euros, and they're going to pay out around 1.5 billion euros back in debt during the first 6 months this year. They're leaving down around 2 billion euro net cash and burning 300 million per month. Even for Ryanair, you know, it will hurt because the market, as you say, is not picking up until maybe summer.
Yeah.
The one thing that the one thing that I want to add there is, and maybe that comes from my own experience, because I just refuse to sit at home. I've been taking flights wherever that is possible, and what Norwegian does there in Norway is, from my perspective, it's smart. I mean, opening routes, trying them out for 3 months, closing them down, doing something different, that has always been a bit in the Wizz Air DNA. So it's not like they're deviating from their strategy greatly. It just, for them, it's just this massive flexibility of being there and doing something when the markets open up. And that's what I've seen now, even in January, now even in February, whenever I've taken a flight into markets that were actually open and where people could travel with, let's say, little effort, like taking a PCR test, then the flights were full. And that's my experience. So what we will really see is, or what is, I think, is key for the airlines, is to keep the flexibility now to, whenever markets open up, go in there very quickly, be faster than the others, and then be, let's say, more suited with your tools than the others to survive the bloodbath that obviously happens if markets open up.
There's one reason why Ryanair has, you know, this kind of cash burn, because normally Ryanair, they are expert in cutting costs, and they cut costs around 65-66% OPEX cost in 2020. But keep in mind that Ryanair is 100% on what we call 100% readiness. All their 737s and all their pilots and cabin crew can start flying tomorrow. They are flying, you know, each 737, I think, 1 or 2 times per week, just to keep, you know, and all the pilots, everything, they are current. So they are, as you said, Max, same as Wizz Air. You know, when the moment is there, these low-cost carriers, Ryanair and Wizz Air, will put in maximum of what they can in capacity, and that will be tough to fight towards by the legacy carriers. And I think that we will see.
Yeah, Hans, there's an interesting
taking charge.
There's an interesting question from Clive, who's talking about what's happening in Austria and this continual discussion about the €40 minimum fare level, and you know how that's going to affect the low-cost carriers. To my mind, it seems a Canute moment in terms of why on earth would you do that? Because everyone will drive over the border and use another airport.
Because they are saving the planet by themselves.
Ah, okay. Maybe they should be a superhero.
You need to look at the bigger picture here.
That was the narrative. Yeah.
Saving Austrian Airlines.
Okay. Yeah, and exactly to that point. So, you know, actually, we all think it's protectionist of Austrian Airlines rather than, you know, saving the planet, although it's good to save the planet. But who's gonna win in that? Austrian Airlines aren't. They can't, because Ryanair will sell every seat at €40, you know, just to destroy and destruct the market and be disruptive. And there is no way Austrian Airlines can sell every seat at 40 euros.
Yeah, I agree. Totally stupid move by the Austrian government. I'm allowed to say that. I worked for another Austrian airline that was not Austrian, but was also heavily under, let's say, we were always helped by the Austrian government, but they're just doing these moves, and then at some point they figure out, oh, maybe that wasn't that smart. But I mean, there is a general question on the fate of Austrian Airlines from my perspective. I just don't think it's a topic for today, maybe for next time. But I think it's a serious and good question to ask: which legacy will actually not survive this pandemic on the short term, but on the long run? And there I have serious doubts for Austrian, for example.
Yeah,
Just Austrian.
Plenty more.
Where are you at the moment?
We have a lot to go through today.
Yeah,
So as Hans mentioned, might be a very, very good topic for next time, Austrian. But let's still talk a little bit about the low costers, especially Wizz Air. So I'm launching the first poll. As we will be discussing, you can answer the question: what do you think about the Wizz Air Abu Dhabi project? Will it be successful? So option 1, absolutely, they've got what it takes to succeed in this market. Or second option, not sure, as the lawyers usually say, it depends on many factors. Or you think that they will walk away in a few years' time with massive losses. So as the votes are coming in, John, maybe you can start with your comments on Wizz Air Abu Dhabi.
Well, I mean, is it, we were discussing this yesterday, guys, weren't we? Is this a marriage of convenience? An airline that has a very large order book, running out of places to grow in Europe, through a process of osmosis, was rippling down into Southeast European and the Balkan states and going further. So, great opportunity for them, and Abu Dhabi needs an equivalent of Fly Dubai, because that's prestige and they need those sort of things. And Abu Dhabi has a wonderful midfield terminal that just doesn't look like it's ever going to be occupied. So, a great marriage of convenience. Strategically, there is a lot of traffic that potentially Wizz could pick up in the Indian subcontinent. One-stop connecting flows with a, short overnight stay in Abu Dhabi between India and Europe, and trade, all of these sort of things. But it's not the same business model as other parts of the Wizz network. They actually have to have an Emirati OAC, and they have to have people in market. And a typical cabin staff salary for Wizz Air will probably buy you a McDonald's and 2 nights hotel accommodation in Abu Dhabi.
Well, right now the hotels are pretty cheap down there, but but that will change as well. What I think they have is with the A321neo, they have a pretty cool aircraft for that market. And the one thing, I just checked the poll. Probably that's what Yura wanted to say now.
Sometimes I feel like I can go for a cup of coffee and leave it to you guys, because you're doing so well.
No, I just wanted to say that I saw that most of the
please.
people said they are undecided on if it's a good thing or a bad thing, and I agree there. I don't know it myself either yet. And there is one condition I just don't know: how much is Sheikh Khalifa paying for having that low-cost carrier set up down there in Abu Dhabi? Are they just getting discounts on airport fees and whatever down there, or are they really pouring in money from the into this joint venture? Because don't take me for granted here. It's just a rumor that I've heard, but there is this you can call it, maybe it's an urban myth. I start this urban myth now. Apparently, well, that's a story, right? I've heard it. Don't take it for granted. Don't sue me on it. But I've been told that Varadi went to the Sheikh and said, look, for 10% of the money that you pour into Etihad, I'm going to deliver you twice the amount of passengers. And maybe it's just a joke that's going around. But that's the one thing I don't know, right? So it might be really, let's be honest, all the connectivity that is down there in Abu Dhabi and that was created through Etihad, that was bought connectivity, bought passengers, bought volume. They just poured a lot of money into it. And then probably the setup on how they did it on this premium luxury carrier Etihad wasn't, you know, best value for money, but or best ratio for money. So this is the opposite idea of pouring as little money in there and trying to get as many passengers. And that's the one part of the equation I just don't know. If that's the case, that there is a lot of money flowing into that joint venture from Abu Dhabi, then I think this is a pretty cool setup for Wizz Air as well. The only problem they have now, if they promised passengers, they will have a pretty rough time this year to deliver on those numbers. But I guess there will be a force majeure clause in that contract, hopefully.
But what is the one difference between the Emirates business model and what was the Etihad business model of the last 10 years? What is the one difference, and where did it fundamentally go wrong?
Because investments, foreign investments.
Exactly.
Yeah,
they did a lot of equity investments.
They were as stupid as the Swiss to recreate the qualifier group, the hunter strategy, as we would call it.
But in terms, you know, guys, that I've been working in the low cost airline, and I know what it, in terms of putting up a new base, flying to a new airport, is one thing that makes a decision, either in Dublin, in Budapest, in Luton Airport, or any other low cost area head office. It's what you pay to get me in. What is the growth incentive scheme? How low is the airport fees? What can I earn? How can I make more money with my assets and inventory in Abu Dhabi than in Oslo? I mean, this is very simple, and all the airlines, all the airports, they know this exactly how to flirt with the low-cost carriers. So I don't have any figures on what is the driver behind, driving Varadi and his team down to Abu Dhabi. But what we know is that Etihad has been extremely unsuccessful, I would say, not unprofessional, but unsuccessful with their equity investments in Europe. Maybe they learn a lesson. So they will make contracts, and the risk will go down, and they even will get feed into their hub with Wizz Air from India. India subcontinent is a huge market where Qatar is very strong, by the way. And so I think there's a synergy, even though also Abu Dhabi want to have tourists, and low-cost carriers a good instrument to drive up the market segment.
But Hans, I mean, you're trying to be very nice here and very, very, let's say, polite. And it's probably that should be my part here, right? But let's face it, I think the investments that Etihad did were highly unprofessional. I mean, if you run a normal due diligence and you come up with a proper strategy, why on God's earth would you ever invest into Darwin Airlines and rebrand it as Etihad Regional?
They tried to save Alitalia.
Right.
The unions put the brakes on. Etihad was actually willing to go in with a lot of money, but the unions, Air Berlin, also it's a long story. We need a whole program to talk about that. But I mean, I know the guys who was in the top management level in Etihad doing these things. And I mean, the idea was good, but it's very complicated to do merger and acquisition and equity investment in airlines. We have one good example.
Well,
here.
Especially when the airline is for sale for a reason. And Air Berlin, Alitalia, no whatever. You buy old, almost, crab apples, and that's what they bought. And then they didn't have the resources to turn them around.
One good example was pretty new, and it's very close to where you go to office every day, Max. That's Lauda. Was
right.
Lauda a successful investment for Michael O'Leary? Yes or no?
Well, if he gets a huge discount in the next Boeing order, then probably it was a good discount. It was a good investment. If that doesn't pay off, then no. It
was not.
Yeah.
And I don't think Ryanair is going to invest in any airline ever again.
You said that, right?
I won't say he said it. I said Hans said it.
Okay.
But I'm sure, that it's very complicated. And again, going back to Norway and Norwegian, we're talking about merger and acquisitions. IAG was on the verge to put an offer. They did put 3 offers on Norwegian. During that, the first 2 months, I even met with Willy Walsh, not on behalf of Norwegian, but I gave him some advice on the situation. And that would maybe have been, a good deal for IAG, a good deal for Norwegian, and a good deal for, low-cost competition in Europe. But it didn't turn up because Bjørn Kjos, the major owner in Norwegian, he had more balls on his own future than on the future being owned and run by Willy Walsh. That's why it didn't happen.
Hans, will we see mergers as we come through this, or will we see commercial mergers rather than politically inspired mergers?
Very good question, John. I'm not really sure because the history of merging airlines is bad history.
The only places, the places I think where it's been successful are in the US, where we saw consolidation. But, quite frankly, the way they controlled the domestic market and capacity in the domestic market for almost 8 or 9 years gave them a license to print money. But I can't see that being replicated anywhere else in the world. And apart from Korean and Asiana, who, quite frankly, I think it is politically inspired. Any other merger is fraught. Air Europa be half price to IAG. Doesn't solve the problems of integration.
So what might happen, the fact is that the airlines now, they are also heavily indebted with debt that is actually not being invested in assets. It's just debt to keep the airline flying with a few aircraft, but it's going to be a big challenge and going to be exposed in the balance sheets for years. And who's going to invest in an airline that is so heavily indebted that we don't know what is the cost or the risk to survive and to be able to pay back. I think we will see new players coming in, new investors, maybe not even known to aviation today. They will take advantage of extremely good prices for leasing and buying aircrafts, and they have the capital. And we see the capital markets are really running after the bond offers that have been in Europe. On Tuesday, Boeing raised 10 billion euros in one day in the bond market. So somebody believes, there are pretty many believing that the aviation come back.
And I do as well. And, there's an interesting question from Javier, and I'd love to know how many airlines we would think would do this. Is anyone ever going to try long-haul low-cost again? I mean, it's not going to work, is it?
I think, yes, there will be people trying it. It will just not work. I agree there. Yeah.
So what's happening with JetBlue? Are they a true low cost? I mean, they are about to start.
How can you be low cost when you've got this mint product that tastes like a polo with a hole in it? Is that the right air? That is not a low cost model, and they will not be selling low cost across the Atlantic.
But it's a good question. I mean, it's completely deviating from the whole program that you planned here, Jura, with that question. But
yeah, I'm already thinking about what should I do.
Mark my words here. I don't think JetBlue will be successful with this.
Okay, let's see. Future will tell.
Write it down. We can discuss it in 3 years when they get out of market.
It's being recorded. Yeah. So we can do that.
Yeah.
Another thing I wanted to discuss today, something completely different. Let's go back to Earth, I would say, and let's talk about the Travel Pass initiative by IATA. So obviously on the 19th of January in the press release, they said Emirates will be one of the first airlines globally to try out the IATA Travel Pass. Later the same day, they shared more or less the same press release that Etihad as well will be one of the first airlines globally to join that initiative. So I want to ask Max a question. So you recently spent some time in Dubai to find out more. So what are the findings of your investigation?
I need to be careful now what I say. So, look, no one ever asked me for a travel pass. So I tell you exactly what my experience was. Beginning of January, after figuring out that we had 11 hours of sunshine in November and December in Switzerland, I said, okay, enough. I went to my Instagram and I figured out that all the influencers are flocking to Dubai. So I thought, hey, I'm an influencer too with my 20 followers. I need to go, right? So I booked a flight on Swiss though, and I went to the internet to obviously, educate myself as you have to do it nowadays, because otherwise it will just turn you down at the airport and say, sorry, you don't have whatever. So for Dubai, I had to have a PCR test, not older than 96 hours. I had to have a confirmation from my insurance that they cover COVID while I'm there. Obviously had a ticket and, make sure they let me in. And so the first thing, so the travel pass was not an issue at all. No one cared about it. No one has ever heard of it. I think also it comes about half a year late, but let's see if it ever, if it gets better. My experience, and IATA on the travel pass says it's there to tell people what they need to travel with the vaccination and whatever. My experience from flying right now actually is they should educate their ground staff first, because you constantly get asked, do you have this paper and this paper and this? And I'm like, no, I don't need that, but I need that, And then she's like, oh, good thing right? So they have no idea. These PCR tests that everyone has to show up with, let's be honest, that's a hoax. When I go to Zurich, I go to my PCR test, I get a Photoshop PDF. They Photoshop in the signatures from the doctors. Every PCR test looks different. Some passengers are just showing their phones where it says negative. Come on, that's a joke. I can show that myself. In Dubai, where apparently the standards are very high, and they have a big thing. You have to have insurance, you have to have PCR tests. It works like this: you arrive there, no one ever asks you about your insurance, and then at the very last elevator where it goes down to the baggage pickup, after passport control, I believe already, there is airport stuff that says PCR test. So you show them a piece of paper and all they check is the date on it, and it says negative, nothing else. They don't take it or anything. It's an alibi for whatever it is. We're creating a lot of paperwork. Oh, that was the best thing. On the flight at the plane, I had to fill out 2 more forms for the Emirati government, which no one ever collected. So the crew handed them out, we had to sign them, and then no one ever, So what we're seeing right now, and I had the same experience yesterday flying to Croatia. So you have to fill in, I'm going to Croatia online, and then the health, that's for the border police, and the health authorities want some other paper. They're just producing a lot of paper right now. No one checks anything. So if I would have some criminal energy, I would run the largest PCR test facility in the darknet. I think that's a brilliant business idea right now. So I think all these initiatives are not really thought through. They're all very late. And I have no hopes that it will change. I think, people will have mass immunity either through vaccine or just everyone had it. And probably sometime, hopefully by end of June, July, and then hopefully from then on, they have to release it. But the one thing that I noticed also, the moment the travel restrictions are gone, planes are full. So every flight I took so the thing that kills travel is the quarantine. If people have to take tests, they do that. So the flights I've been where you can go just with a test, no quarantine, they are full. The ones where you do have to quarantine afterwards, they're empty. And that's pretty much what it comes down to.
Just a quick note, in the press release, IATA said that they plan to release those travel passes in April. So that's the plan at the moment, and it should be a mobile app. So maybe at least less printed papers.
I tell you what we will be ending up. We'll be ending up with our 30-year-old yellow WHO vaccination passes. I'm pretty sure that's what it is.
Or a biometric chip.
Yes. Here.
or somewhere, but I think that's probably the pace of change and the acceleration of technology and digitization. We may have to just accept, we're all going to go.
You meant that serious?
Yeah, I do.
Really?
I genuinely think, I've seen a lot of work around that from my OAG days, And that whole concept about your bank accounts on a chip, your life's on a chip is, it's probably coming quicker than you expect, I'm afraid.
Actually, SIS, they have done some tech on this, and they have actually tried out a couple of years, some persons with this kind of chip implemented in the hand or somewhere where you have all the data. When we talk about the vaccine passes, in Denmark and Sweden today actually announced that they are going to launch that. Denmark will have it launched by April. I think Sweden is just behind. And here in Norway, the government is also considering this. But as we discussed before, vaccine pass, it's good. But if the vaccines themselves, if it's AstraZeneca, Moderna, or Pfizer, if Max traveled to Croatia, he has taken the vaccine. He has the vaccine pass. But if the vaccine doesn't hinder you to be a carrier of the virus, despite you don't get ill, you can carry it. What then?
Yeah, so that's why probably it won't work in isolation. We will still have testing, maybe for forever. Maybe we will have testing with traveling. So let's see. We've been talking quite a lot about the airlines so far. Let's dedicate our last 15 minutes today to the airports. And I'm launching the second poll. So let us know what you think. And we are going to talk about the government support for the airports. So should the European airports, let's talk about Europe specifically, receive similar support from the governments as some of the airlines have been enjoying? Of course, not all airlines have been supported from the governments.
So why everyone is polling, I've been just going through the questions, and there was one from Philippe. Are not PCR tests the responsibility of the airlines prior to boarding? Yeah, you would think so. I have experienced everything. So to Dubai, indeed, Checkport did a big check on that before the boarding. I've been to other flights where no one really cared, and then the passport control was checking up on it.
But, isn't that an abdication of responsibility by the control authorities? It's a bit like, get the airlines to collect airport APD and then give it to the revenue departments. It's about getting the airline to check all of the visa requirements, etc., etc. Sometimes these authorities have got to realise that if the airline is burdened with more administration and time and effort, that they should be recompensed for it, or indeed the airport should be recompensed for it, rather than having to absorb the cost. It's just, it just burdens the industry with cost.
I hate to break this to you, John, but outside of UK, it doesn't matter, because the cost will be buried will be covered by the governments right now anyway.
Well, Max, you're absolutely right, but I hate to break this to you. We'll all be traveling on the 17th of May because we have vaccines. So
right.
So,
well, have fun on your flight from London to Birmingham.
Well, yeah, but we can go to, we may well be able to go to the US in a corridor or a bubble because they are the only people who are managing to keep up with the rate here.
Yeah, it's true. I agree with you. I saw a shocking number today. If the speed on the vaccine continues as it continues right now, the UK has 99% of the population vaccinated by the end of June. Germany and France will have 17%. So.
Yeah.
So it doesn't help if you go to France, if you go to Spain, if you go to Italy or Greece, if those countries are not up to around 70% vaccination rate of their population.
Well, Hans,
there might be some restrictions, right?
Yeah, Hans, I think the more serious issue, and something we featured in an OAG webinar a couple of weeks ago, is the nationality's propensity to accept a vaccination. And in the UK, we're extremely compliant, but in Germany and France, less than half of the population will be willing to take a vaccine.
No, John, that's not true. The moment they say you can go to a football stadium with a vaccination, that's what they right now discuss. It's not a joke. I tell you, that number goes up.
Well, that may be the case, but the problem is as much about just social acceptance of a vaccination.
Let's get back to a real issue here. Sorry, you're one more thing, and that's something we haven't discussed at all. as I said, I've been to the Emirates, and Emirates Airlines is vaccinating their people right now like crazy, and they really have problems because they have two vaccinations right now. One is BioNTech, the Pfizer one, and the other one is Sinopharm or Sinovac, the Chinese one. And the flight crews, obviously, they don't have to, but they're being told, look, it would be nice because you literally, it's like that. If you're vaccinated as a flight crew, you get your flights. But the problem is, the flight crews are now really worried that if they get the Chinese vaccination, for example, they can't take flights to Australia or New Zealand because Australia or New Zealand are not, let's say, accepting the Chinese vaccination. So that's another issue we have for our industry, right? So let's assume half of the world's population gets a Chinese vaccination, which is very likely because that's half of the world's population in that area of influence. It might be that half of the world can't travel to the other half of the world because they're not vice versa accepting the vaccinations, which is crazy as well if you think about it.
Yeah, that's a topic for not just a separate webinar, maybe for a 2 days conference. So I'm sure we will talk about it in the future when we will go back. Well, we will get to that. Let's get back to the airport topic. So as 56% of our audience thinks that the airports definitely deserve some kind of economic support from the governments. 11% think the airports should take care of themselves, and 33% should think that the airport should get some support, but not as massive as the airlines. So just two figures I wanted to share with you before we start to talk about this topic. As ACI reported in, I think it was November, so maybe those figures are not 100% accurate, but until November, almost 32 billion euros were spent on government financial aid to the airlines. At the same time, just 840 million euros were dedicated to airports, which is less than 3% of what's been granted to the airlines. So are we moving somewhere here? Do you think that the airports will be supported in a more robust way, Hans?
Let me start on the positive side here in Norway. Norway, we have one thing that you don't have in Croatia, Slovakia, or Austria. We have oil and gas. So our sovereign wealth fund had a small 10% gain on their shares last year, which resulted in 100 billion euros extra added to the government accounts. So what we did here is the Avinor, which is controlling, operating and owning almost 40 airports in Norway, they have got 500 million euros until now in state aid. Smaller private-owned airports have been given less. They have been receiving around between 3 and 5 million euros for keeping alive. So in Norway, they have been taking actions on that. And of course, without the working airports, where should the airlines land? They don't all have seaplanes.
John, I'm curious to hear your comments because obviously you've been very vocal for quite a long time that we have definitely too many airlines in the world, definitely in Europe. Do we have also too many airports?
We may well do, and that has for so long I've preached about, we need airline consolidation and we probably need airport consolidation, and we got IATA on the webinar, and no better example than Krakow and Katowice. And do we need two airports in that particular catchment area? No, we probably don't. One would suffice. Bristol and Cardiff. There's so many examples of this.
But that's a bad example because I have to cross a bridge if I fly to Bristol and I want to go to Cardiff.
Well, quite frankly, Max, I thought you would have walked on water, but that's another.
Right.
But, I think the more salient point than seeing the second coming is that there are airports that quite frankly should be closed down and should fail. This whole thing is about rationalization, and the new world and the new normal is different. And we've seen some airports that have transitioned from being airports to being business centers and to being better real estate assets than they were when they tried to function as an airport. And there's probably 50, 60, 70 airports in Europe that could fall into that category.
Yeah, in the same paper, ACI said that close to 200 airports in Europe are facing the risk of insolvency.
How
this
many have
November.
failed so far? I know of Paderborn in Germany that went into Chapter 11, or like the German equivalent, but it's not like there have been a lot of stories there.
Well,
maybe they do it silently, but
yeah, we have a semi-closure here in Cornwall that sort of closed until the summer season. But no one knows when the summer season is going to happen now. Of course, that's a bit of a problem. And there are other airports that are just 2-3 flights a day, and it's just so suboptimal in so many ways.
Yeah, it's also very, very much the political topic many times. Sometimes every president of the region wants to have his own airport.
But again, if you look into low-cost carriers and guys, I have been having my time in Ryanair's head office in Dublin and know that business pretty well. If we stay, in Italy and parts of Spain, and in southern France, to mention a few, those areas are depending on tourism. And without an airport close to, that city or that area, those regions will have a very tough time.
Yeah.
So that's why all those special deals we could talk hours about, happens, because they need to attract Ryanair and others, to fly there, to bring the tourists there. It's not much to bring the people from those regions to somewhere else, it's to bring people down there. And without those airports present, you get too far off, and those regions will have a serious problem with their tourism investment.
The economic impact of an airport should never be understated. It's probably a multiplier of 9 or 10. And Krakow is a great example of, if you went to Krakow 15, 20 years ago, and you suddenly went there 20 years later, the difference in the profile of the city and the wealth of the community has been transformed off the basis of air service and economic activity around the region. And Hans, you're absolutely right. There are islands that are completely dependent on that. Antigua in the Caribbean, 70% of their GDP is tourism related. So if the airport closes, they've got nowhere to go. It's vital.
But John, I have a question here. So we discussed this topic right now, but is this even a topic? Are there governments out there that would be, because I think everyone on this call here agrees, or on this show agrees, that how vital an airport is, probably because we're also looking through our aviation minded brains. But do you think the governments are really that stupid that they would let airports go bust now? Because I have a feeling that wherever you go, even in the most, Krakow is also a good example, because when you go there, the airport is the pride of the city, right? So I have a feeling that politicians are getting away with a lot of things, slow vaccination and whatever. But if the local communities have to close their airports, I think that politician will just not get re-elected. So I think once the airport is there, there need to come a lot of factors into place that it really goes out of business. So I think it's very much different to an airline, which
Max, I think you're right, but I think as part of that, airports have got to become more commercially orientated, and they've got to change some of their proposition from being just an airport to being a commercial center,
right,
that has other revenue streams around it.
But let's be honest, the way they're currently run, which is mainly politically, usually, because how do you become an airport CEO? Usually you have some ties with the local politics. And if you talk to the airport guys, it's always what they say, I love my job, but the political part is really the one that drags me down. But that's exactly what saves them now in this crisis as well, and makes it very, a very stable business still.
In some parts of the world, absolutely.
Yeah, okay.
In other parts of the world, it doesn't. There's probably 47 commercial plus airports in the United Kingdom who've got some sort of service operated. Yeah. And how many of those are sustainable going forward is a real question. And importantly, now is the time for those people who, are environmentalists to really push the button and say this airport isn't necessary.
I can tell you, like in Norway, where we have Avinor, which is a government-owned airport operator, and they have, I think, around 40 airports now. And I think we can count 3 or 4 of those airports that are profitable. The rest is making a deficit every year. And that deficit is being covered by commercial revenues from the main airports that are being channeled into to fund those airports are spread around, in the coast and inland of Norway. So without, you have a big Oslo Gardermoen airport where they have a huge turnover in commercial income. If that business disappears, that will hurt those. It's about 120 million euros every year that's allocated to cover up for those airports going in a deficit. So you think everything is connected here. So in countries like Norway, we depend on aviation. This will continue even though the airport doesn't make money.
But Hans, and Max, here is the deeper philosophical question, isn't it?
Okay, you have 1 minute, John.
If we all understood,
Is the Earth flat?
Well, I think Max can probably stretch time because he's walking on water at the moment. But philosophically, has any government handled this well from an aviation perspective? Cite me a government that has done a really good job through COVID-19 from an aviation perspective.
It just wasn't the priority. I mean, that's quite understandable.
The CARES Act in the United States has been good for enormous amount of people who else have lost their jobs. It cost 50 billion US dollars though.
Yeah, but from that perspective, you could say the German government did a good job as well, because not many there. I mean, yeah, a lot of people still lost their jobs, but not as many as if they wouldn't have done anything. But from that perspective, I really think the only guys that did it somewhat right were the Chinese guys, because their aviation is back to normal levels. And
it's not. It's gone back now. It's falling back rapidly in China.
Is it?
Yeah. It's down by about 20% year on year now.
Okay. But still, that's 20%, not 90, right?
Yeah, it's better than most. Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And very shortly, we are coming to days when we will be comparing 2021 levels with 2020 levels after the lockdown. So I hope that the percentages will be looking a little bit more positive. Yeah. I'm not sure if phenomenal is the correct word, but definitely today's discussion was phenomenal. Thanks a lot, gents. Thanks a lot, Hans, John, and Max. It was great discussions. We had a lovely comment from Clive, who had to leave, but he was very pleased with the discussion, and he encourages us to keep doing that every month. So we'll be definitely doing that on a regular basis. Not promising every month, but maybe we can get there. Thanks everybody for joining us. Before I say goodbye, I have to share with you just a little invite for a show my colleague John Howell is doing on Friday, 12th of February. Well, he will be interviewing live on AviaDev Inside Africa podcast, an audience with Mr. Abderrahmane Berthe, for the Secretary General of African Airlines Association. So definitely join us on that one, and definitely also don't forget to follow AviaDev Europe, AviaDev Africa on LinkedIn, where we share all the information, all our podcasts, all our shows, and you find everything what we do, how we support our communities, both in Europe and in Africa. Thanks again for being with us today. Have a lovely day, and till next time, stay safe and stay healthy. Cheers.
Thank you.
Thanks, gents.